Welcome back, everybody. We've got another great show for you. Bitcoin at 22,800 plus and rocking right now. XRP up over 50 cents at the moment, and there are many, many calls for $1 or more in the very near future for XRP. But more importantly, let's talk about this. Brian Brooks' recent comments about investor protection when it comes to proposed rule changes from U.S. Secretary Steve Mnuchin. And did we just trip over the catalyst for the XRP price to absolutely explode? I'll explain. Let's roll that beautiful intro.
This is Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Subscribe for new content notifications. Now, here's Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. You guys can follow me on Twitter at @BackupBradleyAbove at the top of the screen, and everything that we're talking about here today. $22,847 for Bitcoin. Watch out. Yeah, we'll take a look at the XRP price in just a second. This goes out to XRP Crypto Wolf. Thank you, my friend. HSBC has gone into production on R3's Contour blockchain trade finance platform. R3 Contour is one of the big four global blockchain trade finance networks for letters of credit. It goes on in this article, which I'm not going to read to you so you can breathe a sigh of relief, but it goes on in this article to say that they've come up with a solution for R3 recently acquired a bill of lading solution. And that really is the thing to note out of this, aside from the fact of the actual, forward news that HSBC is going into production with Contour with R3. And that is exciting. Remember, R3 also has Marco Polo for trade finance, which used to be an executive at R3 as well. Good things are happening. Okay, that's what we need to know. Good things are happening. Everybody's moving to the new digital path of payment, the new payment rails and payment networks, however you like to refer to blockchain and crypto. That's what we're talking about, and it's good news. Well, here comes some absolutely straight fire news. Coinbase has filed its IPO paperwork with the SEC. The IPO caps an eventful year for the largest American crypto company. First of all, congratulations are in order to Coinbase. And you know what? Right while we're breaking out the applause to everybody, go ahead and congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back, because you just stayed in the market long enough to see that the market is just about to really, truly get going. This marks a pivotal moment. This, to me, is a historical moment, not just for Coinbase, but the entire space. Think about now, when regular investors in the traditional markets see something like Coinbase now publicly listed. What's that? Yeah, what is that? And then you're going to see massive amounts of money pour into it, I believe, once that actually does get listed, because that is going to bring a massive level of awareness. I can give you a little quick story, an analogy, a comparison here. My oldest brother and I were investing in cannabis stocks before we found cryptocurrencies. In fact, that's how I came across it, being in other investment groups and people talking about Bitcoin when it was on its way to 20 grand back in 17 and 18. So that's how I got in. One of the ways that I knew what was going on, and there was other ways I found out about XRP. However, the wonderful thing is that my oldest brother and myself had sat down and we, cherry picked a list of things we wanted to get into, and we did. One of them was a company that was backed by Willie Nelson and Snoop Dogg. And 8 months later, after we invested in it, it ended up becoming the first cannabis company, if I'm not mistaken, to be listed on the NYSE. As you could imagine, that was very, very beneficial for anyone holding it. Same thing applies here. Okay, long story short, this is going to be great, right? This is going to be great. And the awareness that it brings to the space of the picks and shovel companies that are really, really helping to develop and round out this entire emerging market. And I tell you, it couldn't be better news for everyone as it is for Coinbase themselves. Congratulations to them. And hold on, everybody, because it's going to get real quick here. So, U.S. Treasury said to weigh new crypto transaction reporting rule aimed at self-hosted wallets. There's been a bit of back and forth about whether this is good or not. Shout out to Frank Chaparro for this article here. The U.S. Treasury is on the cusp of putting forward new transaction reporting rule for money service businesses that interact with self-hosted crypto wallets. The rule, in the form of proposed notice of rulemaking in the interim final rule, could be made public as early as Friday. Hello, that's today. Yeah. So we'll see what goes on with this, but let me just give you the gist here, because the FBI is also being pushed by the Office Inspector General that Bitcoin cybercrimes are rising annually. 100 million in Bitcoin seized last year. Wow, that's an impressive number. So agents need better, broader, more accessible training. Everybody's getting into the game. Instead of listening to me say it, right? But let's listen to Brian Brooks say it. Squawkbox says, and he was just there. So people may not realize this, but there is a leadership in Congress who's urging incoming administration to roll back some of the protections in the name of politics, not in the name of investors, says Brian Brooks on possible regulation for crypto. Let's just hear Brian say it.
How exactly then do you make it safer for not just the investors, but the people who are trying to traffic or use Bitcoin to make transactions? I wonder whether or not the stuff that you're seeing right now with price action makes it that you have to put more of the kind of compliance impetus on the companies or more of the regulatory policing on the government.
Well, there's a role for both, I think, right? So there are bad actors in this space, as there are in other spaces. And the role of the government is to make sure that markets are well regulated and well organized so that people who are transacting know that they're transacting with good people and not bad people. Part of that means that, as in any financial market, there has to be tracing and no anonymity. But part of it also is that if you hold crypto, or if you're in any other space like this, you need to know that you're not going to lose it. So that's why it's important to people that they be able to custody their assets in a bank, for example, the same as you might custody your stock certificates or any other assets that you own. And again, this is a real political debate right now. People may not realize this, but there's leadership in Congress who's urging the incoming Biden administration to roll back some of those protections, I think in the name of politics, not in the name of protecting investors.
So how?
There it is right there. Brian Brooks just dropped it like it's hot. Mic drop. If he had one, I'll do it for him. There we go. So shout out to Brian Brooks laying it down and going, you know what, this seems like political posturing more than it does about actual consumer protection. And I like this guy. I don't know if he gets to stick around, but I sure hope he does. Probably not if he's going to make comments like that. If they do make the change, we'll see what the constitutional process shakes out. I don't really care who sits in the seat. All I can tell you is from where I'm sitting, it doesn't matter who's in the seat, what we're invested in, what we're following. The journey we are on is much bigger than who sits in that seat. Yes, that is correct. It's coming, whether they like it or not. I refer to Jay Clayton when he was testifying in a congressional hearing, and he told Congress, you cannot ignore it. You cannot turn away from it. You have to embrace this technology and innovation, because if you don't, it will just innovate around you. Yeah, I digress. XRP is 58 cents. Let's change where we're going here. What's the catalyst for big money? Brad, you believe 4 and 5 digits is 58 cents. What's this guy got in his coffee? Well, nothing but news. Let's take a look at it. The recent hire of Sandy O'Connor, and shout out to her. Congratulations to coming on board at Ripple. She will provide counsel on government relations and regulatory initiatives for the company's next phase at Ripple expands and seeks regulatory clarity in the U.S. Yes, that is the word of the day. We need clarity in the U.S. Well, I think you're about to get it, because the CFTC just released a whole bunch of clarity from their end. And that looks a lot like a regulatory sandbox from the CFTC. We're going to take a look at that in a second, as well as many other countries. Now, with that being said, there's some important stuff that Sandy O'Connor has done in the past. She sits on some very, very important boards, and she's also worked directly with the G20 when it comes to legislation and regulation and things of that nature when she was at JP Morgan. So with that being said, let's listen to a quick clip here of Sandy O'Connor and her thoughts here on some of these things about Libor, which is, we're going to get into what it is in a second, but the how the interest rates are currently set, and they're going to be changing to Sofr, which is a different way of computing that information. Let's just listen to this.
And try to ensure that we understand what the approaches are and look to minimize disruptions. I will tell you, one thing that will be critical is a consistency on identifying triggers, should they be necessary, or not sure that they will be necessary, on when legacy contracts will convert if Libor comes to a halt.
If Libor comes to a halt. Now, here's the thing. So let's look at this. If you're not aware, you know what I mean? I know I had forgotten what it was. I had covered it on the show with Cryptopolis. Shout out to co-host Cryptopolis. We're not able to do a show this weekend. But I will say you can follow him on onlycoin.io. And he's doing some great analysis for crypto space, and I believe it's even hourly. So make sure you check that out. So first of all, Libor is really what is used to generate the interest rate right now, right? So, all right. So looking at this, first of all, Sofr, which is going to replace Libor, and I've gotten dates when I looked this up. Sometime between 2021 and 2022, there will be a switch from Libor and the way of calculating that, which I'm getting ready to explain to you, and into Sofr. Now, Sofr, first of all, relies entirely on transaction data, period. So the transaction data that goes on is calculated to figure out what the actual interest rate should be broadly, right? Whereas Libor is basically based partially on market data and expert judgment. So secondly, Sofr is purely a daily rate. So every day this rate is generated based on transaction data, right? Overnight rate is what it's called. So in contrast, Sofr represents a risk-free rate because it is based on treasuries and real data, transaction data. So there is your difference between the two. And what's interesting about this is that it's based solely, entirely here. Sofr relies entirely on transaction data based on treasuries, right? Based on treasuries. What my thought of this is that we do know that they are going to be scrapping the Libor and going to a Sofr. Well, if Sofr is tracked entirely on transaction data based on treasuries reporting this transaction data, wouldn't it be so that in order to have the most accurate information, you would want to use something like, I don't know, distributed ledger technology or the XRP ledger to track that transaction data to get the most accurate risk-free rate? This may be our catalyst for how we get, and one of the catalysts of many factors that become a part of the utility and the advantage of using such a network, and why one would want to switch to it. So we're going to keep an eye on this, but I find it very interesting that Sandy O'Connor, who you were just listening to, talking about if Libor should end abruptly, how they handle that, right? And now she's working at Ripple, who actually has an XRP ledger that could support the transaction data collection for the entire banking system using the ledger. Come on in, right? Which could truly be done, if you think about it, just like Miguel Villas and myself talked about here, where, let's see if I can get this.
Kind of wax and wane over the last few years. So that makes me happy. And look, even if it's a private fork of the ledger that's only validated by the central bank, that's still a huge vote of confidence for the ledger and for the underlying architecture. So that's like good stuff.
So it's a huge win for the underlying architecture, which would be the XRP ledger, if they were to issue stable coins on the ledger, like we were having that conversation based on Brad Garlinghouse's comments. If you don't know, for some reason you don't know, that is Miguel Villas, the former head of XRP Global Markets, talking about the potential of maybe a private fork or basically a private system built on the XRP ledger open source technology for the entire central banking system, which could potentially tie us back into This with Sandy O'Connor talking about the Libor rate, potentially stopping and coming to a halt and switching over abruptly to the Sofr rate, which uses and relies entirely on transaction data, which would only be captured in its perfect form using something like distributed ledger technology or the XRP ledger. Correct? Correct. Now, we've also discovered a trend here, which is amazing because this is Moneygram, and I covered this yesterday, and I played the clip for you, but I want to do this again because I think it's important. What we're talking about is, listen to this now, stay with me. We're talking about the central banking system launching a private network on top of the XRP open source ledger technology. It's nothing but good news for the underlying architecture and anybody holding XRP. That's the point to that. Because XRP has one price. David Schwartz has told us that. So it's good news, however you look at it. So here we go. But we had this partnership with Moneygram, which we still have, but you have this partnership with Moneygram and Ripple and the use and settlement of XRP, which should prove to you without a doubt that XRP is not a security because the SEC had to approve that partnership and that deal, which was obviously, clearly on the table that they were going to use XRP for settlement, which they've been doing for a year and a half without any problem at all. So the reality is XRP is not a security, okay? And we can walk around that sandbox all day, but that's what's in it. All right. So when you look at this, Moneygram was an experiment. It was a chance for not only the regulators to examine a live experiment of what is happening with this asset and what are the ups and downs and are there any pitfalls? Is there something we're not seeing? And make sure they cover all sides of looking at this before you try to regulate it. I believe it was a real litmus test for the world to see this and all of the industries to pay attention to this. Anyone dealing with any remittance, transaction, settlement, cross-border, right? Banks included. So if this was, and it was and has been and still is a very successful test, right? Live test. So with that being said, what else do we know? Well, in 2019, when I was in Singapore and I was spending time with David Schwartz there, we talked going down the steps, and you'll hear just a portion of us discussing Moneygram. What you don't hear is at the end of this, it was the last comment that he made as we were headed into the conference. It was really about at the end of all of this conversation was really about there's nothing left to do but ramp this thing up. Maybe ramping it up isn't just using it to settle in more corridors than just the USD to Mexico and a couple others. Maybe ramping it up means it worked. It showed the world, regulators, governments, and other industries that it is absolutely the solution to where we're going. And maybe ramping it up means using the XRP ledger for not only to issue stable coins, but to also transact data and collect that data to have a proper Sofr rate because we're going to ditch the Libor rate as well. And going along with that, let's take a look at this clip really quickly.
Such an incredible win-win. Yeah. And the biggest thing for us is that it means that we have effectively an unlimited source of volume for on-demand liquidity transactions, and we have a motivated customer. So, and to be honest, it took us a while to get it right. It's been kind of a bumpy road, and it's nice to have somebody who can provide you as much volume as you can handle so you can test easily and without having someone who's got some patience and understanding. And the road's gotten a lot less bumpy recently. Real-time application.
And there it is. And shout out to Notorious and the gentleman that sent this to me. It's just amazing. I brought this up yesterday, and then all of a sudden we had, I think it was Al T sent it to me. Shout out to Al T and Notorious for that great video, because that was a live feed from 2019 at Swell, and it's not retrievable unless someone captured it. Notorious. He is notorious. He got it. So basically the conversation there was really about the idea of Moneygram being this huge litmus test and had this huge amounts of volume, all this different capital, like an internal treasury, to allow them to experiment with this asset. Now, we even heard in here, if you listen, it gets backed up by what he says in the first few seconds. Listen to this when Julia Chatterley asked him about the use of Ripple and XRP.
I want to talk to you about Ripple as well while I have you, the payments network, because we recently had CEO Brad on our show, and he was talking about this provision of the global liquidity arrangement, the sort of transition that they're going through as the business. Your side of the partnership or the arrangement was focused more on the settlement of payments. I just wondered how that partnership has evolved over the last year and how you see it progressing.
Sure, absolutely. We've been partnering with Ripple now for about 18 months. And the idea behind that was for us was to really push innovation and see how we could help, in the pioneering of the expansion of global utilization of blockchain. And we've been doing that, as you say, for settlement, for treasury management, really FX management services. And
well, there it is. FX management services is foreign exchange, right? Which is really what they handle back end with remittances. Not a surprise, but that's where they focused on with XRP. And the idea that XRP could be paired to every currency in the world and eventually every tokenized asset of value in the world as well. That's where we're going. Okay. And then we keep an eye on the trend that we find around here, because the trend that we find around here is exactly this. With this moment we've been waiting for, because the top international level down to domestic level, we're about to see more evidence of that today. And I cannot impress upon you enough that this is what is happening right now before our eyes. The digital currency regulation gets backing from the G7 finance officials. And then here's a slew of information we see in this turn. Increased CBDCs will accelerate dumping of the U.S. dollar as preferred global reserve currency. The IMF cautions central banks may have to rethink what constitutes reserves. The U.S. dollar is on the cusp of losing its dominance and status as the world reserve currency. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Are you hearing this right now? This is the IMF making a recommendation to pay attention to the U.S. dollar to the European Central Bank, right? Okay, everybody thinks it's so futuristic, right? It's way off. That's never going to happen, right? That happens in Turkey. That happens in Cyprus. That happens in Venezuela. This guy. Head on a swivel. Global stable coins could eventually become the reserve currencies. Private digital currencies could emerge as important international currencies, with Libra Diem now possibly becoming the first example of a global stable coin or a digital US dollar, right? Okay. And then we see the Financial Conduct Authority, which I showed you yesterday, has come out with temporary registration regime for crypto firms. BaFin, which is really tied to the European Banking Authority, defines virtual currencies as a digital representation of value that is neither issued by a central bank or public authority nor necessarily attached to legal tender. Virtual currencies are acceptable in natural legal persons. You see the definition. All these things are rolling out. BaFin, Federal Financial Supervisory Authority. They're using the definition, of the European Banking Authority in their opinion. Now, and then coming here, the CFTC released this late yesterday. And look at this. This is really a regulatory framework. Digital assets versus virtual currencies. They explain them. Virtual currencies, sometimes called coins, native tokens, or intrinsic tokens, continue to be an important part of the digital asset landscape, which include markets. CFTC oversees. A common feature of virtual currencies is their intended purpose to serve as a medium of exchange. I don't know if it's me. Am I in left field and everybody's on the pitcher's mound, or are we on top of this thing? Because I believe it is the latter. We are on top of this thing. From the top down, we're seeing it. And what this looks a lot to me like from the CFTC is a regulatory sandbox defining what these things are. And as long as you understand where you fit within this equation, and yes, it does talk about digital assets, key features of them may take many forms and utilize various underlying technologies, including distributed ledger technology. This is pretty impressive to me. And I have to say, when you think about the issuance of CBDCs off of the XRP ledger, understanding that the Libor rate is going to end either in 2021 or by 2022. And there's going to be a switch over to Sofr rate, which is your interest rate that is generated based on data transaction collection. What is the best way to collect that data? On a distributed ledger technology, an immutable ledger. That's what we're looking at. This may be the big catalyst for XRP that none of us saw coming, and it may not be. But I know one thing. Something is coming, and it's imminent. That's going to do it for me. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe. Leave a comment below and share with somebody you know. Hit that notification bell. Join Link 2. Guys, join the community. Even if you're not an accredited investor right now, I firmly believe that all of you will probably be accredited investors in the very near future. And if that should happen, because I don't give financial advice, but if that should happen, wouldn't you want to already kind of be aware of what your options are and things that you may have access to that you currently may not right now? It's a great community for learning as well. All right, that's going to do it for me. Check out all the links in the description box and the comment section. There's really great stuff there. And shout out to the winner of the Unstoppable Domains giveaway, which is chiapet.crypto. You have won Jingle Bell Rock .crypto. I am jealous. It is already in your account. I've been informed by Unstoppable Domains, and I want to thank Zaya and everybody there for helping me through that. That was really great. So I will catch all of you on the next one.